Hello friends, Jermaine here and welcome to this course where we are going to be building a Flutter application using Firebase as a backend, and this is what the app looks like. It's a chat application which runs on the web with Flutter Web and also on the mobile. We're able to authenticate using Google sign-in. So when I click on that and select an email, I'm now signed in. I can type a message and hit send, which pops up here like so, and then on the mobile we see that the message also appears here, which contains the name of the sender as well as the sender's avatar retrieved from their Google account. I'm also able to sign in here, and I'm also able to respond. At this point I can also reply to the message, and it appears like so. We can also delete a message by swiping the message to the left or right. We can sign out of our app by clicking the logout button at the top right, which signs us out, and we can also do the same here. Okay, so if this looks good so far, be sure to smash the like button. This course is going to be quite detailed, so it comes in two parts. This is part 1 of the course. If this is your first time to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss out on future tutorials demonstrating how to build full stack applications with Dart and Flutter. And without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start this project from scratch, and before we go ahead and run the Flutter create command, I want to draw your attention to the docs. So specifically this bit where we need to create a project with web support. So before we do Flutter create, go ahead and run these 3 commands, which will enable Flutter web support in our project, because we're going to be running our app on the web as well. And once you've done that, then cd into any directory and then type Flutter create and then the name of our project, which we call the chat crew. And when that is done, just cd into the chat crew, and then let's open this in VS Code. Let's go ahead and run our Flutter app. So I'm going to select let me just dock that to the side. And then let's go ahead and open our main.dart, and I'll just run this project. Okay, so we got our Flutter project running with the basic boilerplate example. What I'm going to do is to clean this up a bit more, so I'll get rid of all these comments. I'm going to remove some of these widgets, so we don't need the floating action button, for instance. I'm going to get rid of this center widget, and then I'm going to remove these 2 text widgets. I'll remove these as well. So it should look like this now. Okay, let's go ahead and hide the debug mode banner. So that's gone now. I'll change the primary swatch in our theme data to purple. Then I'll change the title of our material app and the title in the app bar to the chat crew. And I'll scroll down over here to our app bar widget. I'll center the title like so. I'll set a background color for our scaffold, and we're going to set a hexadecimal value. So I'll start by setting the opacity. OXFF simply means 100% opacity, and then followed by the actual swatch. So it's DEE to D6. and that looks like that. I'm going to have two widgets in here. So the first one will be an expanded widget, which for now will take a container as a child. And then the second widget will be a container. I'll give this container a child, and let's just make a text widget for now that says sign in. So we should see it at the bottom here, like so. I'm gonna add some padding around this container. So we'll have edge inserts.all, and I'll just give a value of 5. And then in fact, for our text, we are going to render a button instead. So to do that, I'm going to install a package called Flutter sign-in button. Which allows us to render a special kind of button with the Google logo next to it. It's more of a convenience widget. If anything, I know I can use a flat button or raw material button, but this makes it much more convenient. So I just use that. And I'll import that package. Like so. And over here, we can use it by rendering the sign-in button widget. And then we need to specify the type of button it is. So we'll do buttons.google. And for now, onPressed will be set to an empty function. Okay, we got a Flutter error, unable to load asset. So let's stop and start this app again. Because this package comes with a couple of assets, image assets, so we need to restart the app in order to load those assets in. So now we can see the button here like so. I'll add some padding to this, which now should look like that. At this point, it's now a good idea to go into Firebase and set up our project and also enable authentication. So let's do that now. Over here in our Firebase console, we can click to add a new project. And then the project name will be the chat crew. And I'll disable analytics. It'll take a couple of moments to create our project. And once it's ready, I'll continue, which brings me here. And what I want to do is to go into my project settings by clicking this icon here and then clicking project settings. And at the bottom here where it says your apps, we need to add an Android app and a web app. So I'll click Android and I'll type in the name of the package, which for now is com.example.thechatcrew. And then the app nickname will be the chat crew. And we need to generate a debug sign-in certificate. In order to do that, you can check out these docs. If you scroll down here, you can copy this command and then run it on your Mac, Linux, and also there's a command for Windows, which will give you an output containing this piece of string here. I've gone ahead and done that already. So I'll do that and I'll register my app. Next, I need to download this config file and place it within the Android directory of the Flutter project. So I'll do that. And let's go ahead and do that now. So expand Android, expand app, and then we'll drag it in. Like so. Once that's done, click next. And we need to do this bit as well. So in our project level build.gradle file, we need to add a couple of lines. So I'll copy this line. And then in this build.gradle file, which is directly under Android, we need to add this line under dependencies and also check to make sure that repositories has got Google added as a repository and also under here as well. So I'm going to save this. Under the app level build.gradle file, we need to add this line. So under app build.gradle over here, we need to add that and make sure this is here as well. And then under dependencies, I'll copy that and then I'll add it here. And once that is done, click next, and then it says you're all set. And then from here on out, we can continue to the console, and then we get this. We're gonna go ahead and add another app. So the web app, so click on web, and then the name of our app, same, the chat crew. You can click register app to register it. And then we have this bit of code that we can copy and paste in our index.html, so I'll copy that. I'll close this Android folder, and then open web, and then index.html, and right before main.dart.js, I'll paste the code here. And then I'll go ahead and continue to the console. So now we've got 2 of our apps added. We will also go ahead and add the SDKs for the particular Firebase product we want to use. So FirebaseAuth, Firebase Cloud Store. So I've got these here, and I'll make sure it's the correct version number. If you also want to find out these, you can visit this URL here. Okay, so I can close this one now. And next we need to set up FirebaseAuth in order to build our login flow. So click on authentication under the develop menu, click on get started. And we want to enable the Google sign-in method. So I'll click on edit configuration, toggle enable. I'll select the support email, which is the email I use to create this account, and I hit save. You can also configure a list of authorized domains. Just make sure localhost is on there as well. All right. Okay, so from here, we're going to set up Firebase Auth on our Flutter project. So we need to install a couple of packages. So firstly, we'll install Firebase Core. And then we'll install FirebaseAuth. And before we progress to using these plugins, I'm going to move this widget out of this file into another one. So I'll create a new folder under lib, and I'll create a new file called main screen.dart. And let's grab all of this and paste it in here. I'll import Flutter material, and let's import the Firebase packages, for now being FirebaseAuth. And then I'll copy this import here as well, Flutter sign-in button. So I'll save this, and then let's import the main screen .dart file. Okay, I'll go ahead and collapse this one and this one as well, because we're not going to be touching those, at least not yet. We are going to implement our authentication logic in a class called AuthProvider. So under source, I'll create a new folder. I'll call it auth, and in here, I'll start by creating an abstract class, which will be essentially used as an interface for our Android and web implementations of the AuthProvider, because they're different, since they're different platforms. So let's create a file called AuthProvider base.dart. And then in here, I'll import the Firebase Core and FirebaseAuth packages, like so. And then I'll create my class called AuthProvider base. This AuthProvider base class takes in 2 methods. So one method returns a Firebase app instance. It's a future, and I'll call it initialize. That contains our initialization logic. And then the second one returns a user credential, which will be given to us once we sign in successfully. So I'll just call it sign in with Google. Okay. So from there we can have our Android and web implementations. So I'll create a new file, and then I'll call it Android AuthProvider. And then in here, we're going to import Firebase Core and Firebase Auth. We'll also import our AuthProvider base class. And let's create our class. So we'll call it Android AuthProvider. Implements AuthProvider base. In fact, we'll make this a private class. And we're going to override our two methods. Each method will be marked as async because we're using async await syntax. So in our initialize function, we're just going to return and we'll await on the initialize app method. And we'll send in our options. So this takes in a name, which is the chat crew, and takes in a list of options. Like so. And the options we're going to be configuring is similar to what we placed in the web directory. So I can, in fact, copy these and paste it here like so. The only change I need to make is the app ID, because that's for the web. If I'm not mistaken, I think I can do that for Android, but let me go to the dashboard and double check. So under project settings, I'll copy this app ID for Android. And let me paste that here. Yeah, it was actually slightly different. No good idea to make assumptions. Okay, that's good. To implement our sign-in logic, our implementation is as follows. We need to trigger the authentication flow. And in order to do that, we actually need to install another package. So this is the Google sign-in package. And what Google sign-in does is it triggers the native authentication flow for Android. And then the logic for all of this, it's in the docs. So if you go to authentication, social auth, and then under Google, we've just done this. So secondly, we just need to copy this logic. And then we'll replace all these to-dos with that, like so. And let me go ahead and import the package we installed. So what's happening is we trigger the authentication flow, which will just display the native prompt on the Android device, and we'll go through signing in. And then once we sign in, we can retrieve the sign-in details, which contains an access token and an ID token. And with those, we'll create a credential, which will be passed in to sign into Firebase. So I'll save this, and we are going to export this class by creating a public AuthProvider. You may be thinking why we're doing this instead of just making this public and using this directly, which is because for the web implementation, we'll also be using the same class name, and then we'll conditionally import each class depending on the platform we're running on. But we're going to be looking at that later. For now, just do this and it should be good. Okay, we're done with these files now. So over here in our main screen state, I'll go ahead and define a sign-in method. I'll make this async. Let's have this in a try-catch block, just in case we get any exceptions. And what we're going to try is sign in. So I'll create a variable called creds, and let me import our auth file, and then we'll do AuthProvider dot sign in with Google. So if we sign in successfully, then we should be able to print out the credentials to the console. If for some reason it fails, then let's print out login failed. Okay, and we need to use this method down over here. So I'll copy that and paste it here. Okay, so let's look at our debug console. I may have to do a hot restart, so let me do that now. Okay, so I click sign in. Okay, let me stop the whole app and then start the whole app again. Okay, let's try and sign in again. Right, okay, so now that shows us that. And let me sign in with my email. And then I will type in my password. Okay, then it takes you through all of these. And I'll just click yes to avoid any issues. Okay, agree. I'm not going to back up. Click accept, and then that should, okay, it says login failed. No Firebase app has been created. Right, my bad. So we need to initialize. Yeah, we need to call the initialize method. I forgot to do that. So in our main.dart, we'll import our Android provider. I'll mark this as async. And before we run our initialize method, since it's asynchronous, we need to do widgets flutter binding dot ensure initialized, else you get an error showing up. And then we'll initialize Firebase. And then we'll run our app. So I'm going to stop. And then let's start it again. So let me go ahead and click sign in. And then we've now been able to sign in because we got these user credentials over here as such. Because we went through the sign-in flow, Android doesn't take us through that again because we already signed in the first time. But we can see all these details here. I'm going to blur some of these out, but there are details like given name, family name, and so on and so forth, my picture, email address, and other bits of information. Also, if we come to our Firebase dashboard and we go to authentication, we see that there's a new entry added here. And this is the email that I just signed in with. And each user is given a unique ID number as well. Okay, so now that we've proven that the sign-in works, I can close this and then we'll come back to our main screen.dart file. Okay, so what we're going to do from here on out is once we signed in, we'll set a state property called signed in to true. So we'll do something like that. We'll signed in. And once we've signed in, I'll go ahead and do a set state signed in and set it true to true. So at this point, we can work on our sign out logic. And in order to do that, we'll show the sign out button when we've successfully signed in. In fact, before we get to our sign out logic, let us hide this container once we've successfully signed in. So I'll say if signed in, if not signed in, then we'll hide this container, and I'll make sure to set this to false, like so. And let's test this out right now. So I'll hit sign in, and then it disappears because we've successfully signed in to the app. So let's look at the logout scenario. So in our app bar widget, I'll configure a list of actions. I'll have the same logic here. So if signed in, then we'll render an inquire widget. On tap, we will invoke a signed out method. It doesn't exist yet, but we're going to implement it soon. And the child of this inquire widget will be an icon, and which renders the logout icon. And let's define the sign out method quickly. Okay, so let's run this, and that gives us this button here. Let's add some padding to the left and right of it. So I'll refactor this and I'll wrap this in a padding widget. And let's set padding on the horizontal axis. I'll set it to 15, so which looks like that now. And I've got it the other way around. I meant to have the inkwell wrapping the padding instead. Yeah, so that looks good enough to me. Okay, so for our sign out logic, this will also be an asynchronous method, and then we'll do FirebaseAuth dot instance dot sign out. And once we sign out, we can update our state by setting signed in to false. So if I go ahead and I click this, then we're signed out, and then we're back to square one. This looks good so far. Let's look at the message form that will pop up at the bottom once we're logged in. And to do that, I'm going to create another widget for that. So let's create a new file, and we'll call this new file MessageForm. Dot. In fact, I'll create a new folder. I'll call it widgets, and then I'll place this in there, like so. Our MessageForm imports Flutter, and we'll create a stateful widget. We'll call it MessageForm, and then we'll have a container with a text widget for now, and I'll just put form goals here. Let's import this into our main screen. And then let's use it over here. So I'll say if signed in, we will render our message form, or else we'll just display the container. So I'll save that. And let's go ahead and sign in. And there we go. Our form goes here. So we'll come to our message form. Let's give this container a temporary color of blue, just so we can see it. Okay. And the child of this container will be a row widget. And then the first child of the row widget will have a text field. And in fact, we're going to wrap this text field in an expanded widget because we want the width to be as full as possible. And then the second widget we're going to be rendering will be a raw material button. We will set the onPressed event of this button to an empty function for now. The child of this button will be a text widget, and it will just say send. And let's see what that looks like. So that looks like that. Okay, let's add a fill color to this button. And we'll take the fill color from the theme. In particular, the primary color. We can style the text by making the color white. And then the font size 14. And let's make it bold. Okay, let's adjust the shape of this raw material button by setting a rounded rectangle border. I'll set the border radius to a circular radius and set it to 5. Just to round off the corners a little bit, like so. And let's pad out this text a bit as well. So I'll put that in the padding widget, and let's increase this to 16. So like that. We'll come back to our text field widget and we'll give this a decoration, which is an input decoration. Let's set a hint text to type a message. Let's fill it with a color by setting filled to true, and then fill color to white. So that should look like that. You can also set the border as an outline input border, where the border radius is also a circular border. And we set the border side to none. And next, let's set the padding of the content area. All around. And we'll set it as 10. And then lastly, we just need to get some padding on the outer part of the widget and also between these two widgets. So we'll add a padding to the parent container. We'll give a value of 5. And then between this expanded widget and the raw material button, I believe we can have a sized box with the width set to 5. And that looks like that. So right now, if we get rid of the blue, then it looks like this. Okay, so next what we need to do is what happens when we type in this text field. Yeah, you notice that it just scrolls off that way when we type, rather than the cursor jumping to the next line. So we can sort that out by adding a couple of options to our text field widget. So such as the minimum amount of lines to 1, and we can set the max lines to, let's just say 3 for now. So which will look like that. So when it gets to line 4, then we get scrolling through the text. But for our use case, I'll set it to 10, so we can have long lines of text. And we need to set an option to the row widget just to ensure that the send button sticks to the bottom. And we can do that by setting the cross-axis alignment to end, like that. And everything else should work pretty nicely. Okay, so in order to be able to capture the message of our text field, I'm going to create a state property called message. And then over here in our text field, I'll define an unchanged event which contains the value of the text field, and then we'll pass that to our message. And in order to grab this message, let's define an unpressed event, which will be a function for our button. And then at this point, let's just print out the message. And then I can pass that in here. Okay, so if I open the debug console and then I click on send, then we get null for some reason. Okay, let me try and do a reload quickly. I'm going to stop and start the app again. You can hit F5 to run the app. Let's sign in. Okay, let me type something and I hit send. Okay, so we've got Lorem Ipsum back. And let's amend this a bit further. So in our message form, we only want to send if message has a value, because if I clear this text field and hit send, we are printing out an empty string. So that's not the effect we want. So to handle this, we can check a couple of things. We will disable this button if the message is empty or it's null. So we'll say if message is null or message is empty, then we'll set onPressed to null, which will disable the send button, or else we will set onPressed to the onPressed method. And in order to get this working, we need to wrap this in a setState function. Like so. I may have to do a hot restart, but let's test it out. Okay, so nothing happens when I click send because it's empty. If I type in a letter, then it gets captured. Okay, so that works quite well. I guess what I can also do is to have the same condition for the fill color. So if it's that, then we'll set the fill color to colors dot, let's say blue-gray, or else we'll render the primary color. So if I go ahead and I delete that, then it's grayed out. If I click that, then it comes back to that and I'm able to submit it. Also, what we want to do is to prevent the same message being submitted multiple times. We need to clear the value of this field the minute we hit send. And in order to do that, we need to define a controller that will do that for us, because you might think it involves just setting message to an empty string and that should clear the field, but it's not going to work for us. So I'll define a text editing controller. And then for text field, I'll pass the controller in here. And then on pressed, what we'll do is we will do controller.clear and then reset the message back to an empty string as well. So if I open the debug console and then I type a character and I hit send, then it logs out was the message and then it goes ahead and clears the text field. But then when I hit send again, we get that same problem. So we also need to do a set state like so. So let's test it out. I type a character, I hit send, then we run set state, and then that grays out again. So before we get to setting up Cloud Firestore, we need to export this message out of this widget to the parent widget to our main screen. So I'll define a value changed property, which is of type string, and I'll call this onSubmit. So value changed is a type def. It's basically a function that takes in an argument or that exposes an argument. And we use that because over here, we are going to do widget.onSubmit and we're passing in message as the argument. And lastly, we need to define this here like so, which therefore means that in our parent widget where our MessageForm is, we'll define an onSubmit function containing the value of the message, and I'll just do a print for now. So let's test this out. I'll adjust this a bit like so. Okay, so let's test this. And when I hit send, we get lorem ipsum back. So that proves this bit is working. So at this point, it would be good to go ahead and set up Cloud Firestore. And to do that, I'll come back to the dashboard. I'll click Cloud Firestore. And then I'll click Create Database. And I'll just leave it to production mode. We're going to change it anyway. I'll hit Next. I'll select a location and enable. Takes a while initially, but we only need to do this once. And once Cloud Firestore is created, the first thing we're going to do is to come to our rules. Right now, the rules for our documents has read and write disabled. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow our app to read from our collection, and we're going to allow our app to write. And we're allowing write only if it's an authenticated user. So to check that the user is authenticated, you can do if request.auth is not equal to null, which means that anyone can read, but in order to write, it has to be an authenticated user. So doing that, we can go ahead and publish it. And that should put us in a good place. I'll come back to data and let's create our first collection. I'll call it chat messages. And let's add our first chat message. This will take in a couple of fields. We'll have an author field, which will be a string containing an author. For now, I'll just put Jermaine. Next field will be an author ID, which will be the ID of the signed in user, the UID value of that. So for now, I'll just put 1. We'll have a photo URL, which we can retrieve from the credentials of the signed-in user. For now, I'll just put a placeholder image. We'll have a timestamp. And the type of this, they've got a timestamp option, but I'm going to use a number, and I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4 because I want the timestamp as an integer instead. So in milliseconds, it's much more flexible to work with. Our first document will also contain value. And for now, we'll just say hello world, and then I'll go ahead and hit save. So this is our first entry here, like so. And let me just go back and then let's go to our code and try and pull this in. Okay, so in order to pull in our first message, well, we need to install the Cloud Firestore package by doing crawl out Cloud Firestore. And once that's done, we will import that over here, like so. And then I'm going to change this child to a stream builder widget because we're going to read our messages in as a stream. And the type of stream we want is a query snapshot. And then the stream we're going to use is Firebase Firestore .instance.collection, and then the collection we called ChatMessages, and then we do dot snapshots, and then we define a builder function containing the context and our stream snapshot. So over here we can do if snapshot has data, so we'll check if there's data in the snapshot. Then for now, let's just return a text widget which will have the snapshot data. And we do .docs, we'll get the first item in the docs, and we do .data, and we'll invoke the toString method, or else we'll just return a center widget with a circular progress indicator, so a spinning icon. So let's check this one out, and I need to stop and start this app again. Okay, looks like we had a problem starting this app. Okay, we got this issue with Dex archives. This was actually mentioned in the docs, so let me pull it up. So if we look at the docs, it says, due to the large number of classes in some of the Firebase SDKs, specifically Firestore, which is what we just installed, it may bump you over the 64K method limit on the Android build system, and we got this error, so we just need to enable MultiDex support. So let's do that now. So if we go to Android and we open app, build.gradle, and then under default config, we need to set MultiDex enable to true. And then we need to add a dependency for MultiDex. Alternatively, if you're trying to target Android SDK 21 and above, I believe you can set the minimum SDK version to 21 and that should be fine. But in our use case, I don't mind adding these two. So once these two are done, just save. And then let's run our app. Okay, you can see that Firestore is giving us our first entry. And if I go ahead and sign in, we have our form. Right, so that looks good. Let's look at how we present this a bit better. Right, so we're going to create another widget that will handle the rendering of these messages. Well, it's going to be a couple of widgets. So I'll collapse this, and then on the source widgets, I'll create a new widget called MessageWall. We will import the dependencies we need. We'll create a stateless widget. We'll call it MessageWall. And then in the build function, we will return a list view. So I'll do listview.builder. This list view needs a list of messages. So let us go ahead and define some properties, which takes in the data from our collection. So the first one will be our messages list, which is of type query document snapshot. And then this will be called messages. And then we need to pass it in here by doing this .messages. And so in our list view builder, the item count will be our length of messages. And then the item builder, so what each message would look like, will for now be a list tile widget. We're going to change this, but just to show that it works. So the title will be messages, and we'll grab the first index, and then we'll do dot data, and then we want the value. So from here, we'll go to our main screen, and then let's import our MessageWall, and then we'll use it here. And our messages will be snapshot.data.docs. And let's fix our error. If we come to MessageWall, we need to make this a text widget. My bad, I always forget. Okay, cool. So we got our first message, hello world, displayed here. All right, so let's go a bit more in depth with this one. We're going to create another widget that will handle the display of these messages. So I'll create a new file. I'll call it ChatMessage other.dart. I'll import Flutter, and I'll create a stateless widget called ChatMessage other, because there's going to be a difference between chat messages from other people and messages from the user that's currently logged in. And ChatMessage other will take in a couple of fields. So we're taking an index. We're taking the data, which is a map object of string and dynamic in value. Yeah, and then let's define these here, like so. And then the child of this container will start with a column widget, because we'll display the avatar and the message next to it. Our first child will be a circle avatar with a background image. This will be a network image, and the URL will be the photo URL field in our data. And let's try and display this now. So I'll come to our MessageWall. I'll import ChatMessage other and have that here instead. We'll pass in the index and then pass in the data. like so. Okay, so that looks like that now. And in fact, we need a row widget. We're going to add a column later. And right next to the circle avatar, we'll have a container. We'll set a decoration, particular a box decoration, because we want to give it a white color for the container, and then give it a border radius of value 5. And then the child of this container will have a text widget, and then let's have the value. So let's check this out. Okay, so that looks like that. So at this point we need to style it so that it looks a bit better. So between these two, I'll add a sized box to add some spacing. Like that. And then I'll set the cross-axis alignment of the row to start, so they're lined up at the top. I'll also set a maximum width for this container, so the messages extend, the width of the message will be no bigger than 300. And the way we do that is not by setting the width, because if we set the width to 300, then it will look like that, which is what we don't want. We want the text to expand till it reaches a width of 300 and stop there. So we need to say maximum width. And the way we do that is by setting some box constraints. Like so, and we'll set the max width to 300. So the text will keep extending till it reaches 300 width. So we can even try that here, like so. And yeah, so the minute it reaches 300 width, it will just fall to the next line. Okay, let me undo all of that. Okay, cool. Let's give this container some padding. So I set horizontal to 10, and then vertical to a little bit over 10. All right, so it looks like it's coming together quite well. We need to display the author. So I'm going to refactor this text and wrap it with a column widget. And then we'll have a text, another text widget before the message containing the author. So we'll do data, and then we'll retrieve the author, set, and then we'll show the value. Yeah, so like that. Let's shift the column to the start. So we'll do cross-axis alignment dot start. And I'm going to add some styling to this. I'll give it a color. A font style. Okay, we can set the font size, make it slightly smaller. Okay, and let's make it bold. Right. So let's make the font slightly bigger. Yeah. We'll also add a sized box just to space it out a bit. So a height of 5. Yeah, that is good enough. Okay. Let's add a margin around the container so it's not stuck to the edge. So we'll have symmetric, and then on the horizontal axis we'll have 10, on the vertical axis we'll have 6, like so. And this concludes the first part of this full course. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss out on the next update. If you've got any questions about this course, let me know down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.